Hi everyone, and welcome back to COM 70, Mass Communication, Media, and Society. This is a two-part digital lesson series. This week we'll be going over two theories, media ecology and agenda setting. Before I get started, I always like to begin class with a clip, and I'll be sure to post it on our site. It's a clip from Star Wars Episode 5. Now, Luke has Yoda on his back, and they're about ready to enter a dark cave. This is where Luke meets who we come to find out is his father. But before he goes into the dark and scary cave, Luke asks Yoda, "What's in there?" And then Yoda, in his Yoda voice, which I will not be doing, says, "Only what you take with you." And I think this is a perfect metaphor for the study of media. What we find in our media research, the way we analyze certain sites, commercials, advertisements, and campaigns, really depends on which theoretical lens we adopt and apply. And that, in turn, shapes the questions that we ask. So, different approaches to the study of mass communication or media doesn't necessarily render different answers, but instead helps us ask different types of questions. I hope that comes to light a little bit more as we talk about our theories. So let's get started on the first one, media ecology theory. Now, on our course site, again for this week, you'll see some additional resources that I've posted to help you further understand the theory. But let's break down the terms. Media, which is the plural word for medium, and ecology, the study of an environment. So media ecology is really the study of the mass communication or media environment. But it goes hand in hand with suggesting that how we use and interact with these different mediums ultimately then shape our identity, culture, or even our daily experiences, right? So let's stop and think about it this way. If media has the power or potential to shift our experiences, are we transformed by the messages themselves or the channels? Well, because media ecology theory studies environments, the theory argues that media itself shifts our experiences more than the messages individually. Let me further explain. For example, how does music as a whole shift attitudes about sex or women? More than, for example, just the lyrics from one particular song. We could also ask how Instagram shapes or changes politics more than individual posts by users. Does that kind of make sense? Again, we can ask different questions because of the theory. For example, how does reality TV shape our perceptions, right? More than an actual show or episode? Or how does text messaging shift or change our relationships with our friends and loved ones more than the actual texts? Now, you might be wondering why there's this really awkward picture of Pharrell and Robin Thicke's early music video, Blurred Lines. Don't worry, that goes hand in hand with this week's discussion and activity. In this music video, they talk about consent. Well, they never say the word consent, they call it a blurred line. How does referring to sexual consent as a blurred line in song form create a different perspective or reality of consent? Okay, so maybe not in these exact lyrics, but over time and repeated throughout songs and genres of music. Media ecology theory also has another argument, and that is that electronic media or the internet is really retribalizing the human race. Now you might be asking yourself, what the actual theory? Okay, this is to say that media makes us smaller because it brings us together. So rather than being in separate corners of the world, we actually become more connected and smaller sort of a global village metaphor, which is the one that the theory creator, Marshall McLuhan, used to describe the ways in which electronic media is retribalizing us as a human race. Now, how might you apply this theory in your everyday life? Well, there's a couple different applications, right? Let's say, for example, that you're interested in a career as a radio DJ and you've been thinking about launching maybe your own political talk show, either on real radio or through a podcast. You could ask yourself how radio itself, as a channel, as a medium, has changed over time with regard to user generated content, and then think about how that would affect your show. Or let's say that you're in a romantic relationship and you're interested in knowing if social media as a whole is a good idea to engage with your partner, right? So sharing, for example, your Instagram. Now, chances are most of us are already doing this, but research shows that in couples who share social media sites, not like where you're both one, but where you have access to each other's social media, that there's increased jealousy and increased relational dissatisfaction. Something to consider. Why might that be? I'll leave you to guess. Or finally, let's say that you're a public school teacher and you want to understand more about how your high schoolers are sexting and the functions of sexting as identity expression for teens so that you can then rework some of that curriculum. Next, agenda setting theory. And this is one of my favorites, especially if you're a conspiracy theorist. This theory says that the media does not tell us what to think, but what to think about. Important distinction there. Here's an example. Think back to our last election in 2016, when then Republican candidate Trump was being talked about heavily by news viewers. Well, what we found in doing some research was that as much as the candidate was being talked about by voters, that was then matched by getting as much television or coverage as all the other politicians and all other politics at the time. So, what does that prove? It proves that we, the consumers, supposedly, judge the importance of a story in the same way that the media judges its importance. So, here's some more questions to consider. What is an issue that's become really important simply because it has extensive coverage? Or what's an issue that's been really ignored due to the fact that it's not had a lot of coverage? Why do you think some news channels cover some stories and not others? Here are some more applications of this theory. Patterns of news coverage across major broadcasts and social media are often measured by prominence, its position, and length of the actual story. If it's longer, it must be more important, and if it's shorter, it's because it's not as valuable. So stop and take a look at the time.com website. What stories are featured at the top? What are the headlines? Do you agree that these are the most important stories of today? Now scroll to the bottom of the page. What stories do you see there? Are they as long? Does their position on the page influence the value that we ascribe to the story? Here's a couple other examples. Women's sports coverage. Did you know that women's sports coverage receives only 5% of prime time air, while men's sports receive 95% of airtime? Or think about tragic and crime news as compared to community building news. We never see the story of the cat at the top of the newswire. It's always down at the bottom. Well, those are just two theories. And again, there's a lot more information that you can find out about them through our reading and additional resources. Thanks so much.